A ceasefire of sorts in the tariff wars between the United States and China. They've agreed to a 90-day truce, and under this new agreement, the US will drop its 145% tariff on Chinese goods to 30%, while China is going to drop its 125% tariff to just 10%. This is quite the development, Kosha.
It is. Now, it is a stopgap measure because it's just a 90-day pause, not a resolution. So we've got a lot of wood to chop, but it's certainly a climb back down from the 145+%. The 30% on China is higher than historical averages, which used to be about 3%. Pre-Trump, and in his first term, he got to about 19%, so it's tougher than that. But he's tying it up with fentanyl and getting China to address the fentanyl crisis in some way, which is this whole China war is as much about that as it is about the trade deficit. So for now, on paper, at least, there seems to be alignment that they will do something about that, but we shall see.
But if we want to have a significant economic realignment, boost American manufacturing, end this reliance on China, particularly in so many crucial supply chains, it can't be this. It has to be something that is more impactful long term. So do you still think that's going to happen, or are we going to end up with something similar to this as the long-term?
It's a big question because there's $600 billion in trade between the two countries, and he's trying to normalize that and equalize that. I think, we'll have to run the numbers on if the 30% holds and some of the supply chains recalibrate to Vietnam and other markets, like what does that do? But I think you're right that on the surface, to some people, it does feel like a little bit of a letdown compared to where the start was. But it could be that once you run the numbers and some of those recalibrations happen, it's moving the needle in the right direction, even if it's not a full saving race.
And isn't it funny, all those Democrats who are obsessed about the share market fluctuations and the drops, they're not so obsessed now when the share market seems to be doing quite well. Now to some wonderful news with the release of Israeli-American Eden Alexander. The 21-year-old was held hostage by Hamas for more than 19 months. Kosha, the release is seen as a goodwill gesture towards the Trump administration in the hopes of laying the groundwork for a new ceasefire deal. How do you think that's going to work? Because we are hearing also about a rift between Netanyahu and the Trump administration.
Also a lot of wood to chop there. I think it is being pitched as that. He was the last American hostage that was held, so young, such heartwarming footage. It was fashioned to have him released before Trump's upcoming trip to the Middle East. That was done deliberately, so it's like a good backdrop on the eve of that. However, there is this rift. There's also a rift in the Republican Party that's getting deeper about the U.S.'s position with respect to Israel, and there are those who believe, it's their strongest ally, and nothing should be stopping how much the U.S. gives to support them in this quest and self-preservation and sovereignty. There is another part of the base that says, you do what you need to do, but we're not going to keep expending military power, financial power, and even diplomatic power to support Israel. And that faction seems to be ascendant, and Trump is really walking a tightrope in that. And then you overlay on that the personality clashes, supposedly, between him and Netanyahu. It's dicey, but I do think this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, we are at a fascinating point because there's so many factors at play, and Iran is of course part of that equation. And Iran's exiled crown prince Reza Pahlavi has slammed Joe Biden and said that Donald Trump's pressure is the best chance of regime change in Iran. He told the New York Post that Biden's reversal of Trump's sanctions on Tehran emboldened the Islamist leadership. He said the Iranian people are trying to send this clear message to the outside world that if you want a true partner in peace, it is us who represent the alternative, not this regime which has taken our country hostage in the first place 46 years ago and continues to do that. And it's not just taken Iran hostage, as we've discussed so many times, Kosha. It's the number one sponsor of terrorism in the region, and you can't really do anything meaningful and long-term about Hamas or whatever's going to pop up after Hamas without addressing the Iranian issue.
And he, the exiled prince, is the eldest son of the last Shah of Iran before the revolution, so he has important symbolic power or voice in this, and that he represents that point, that the people were very moderate and don't want this regime that's been presiding over them. It's also a very difficult topic, though, because, as he said, Biden emboldened them. That's one thing. Many argue that even George Bush with the war, the Iraq war, emboldened them because it created this imbalance and allowed Iran to seep out into the stop gate, at least, that Iraq in some way, not perfectly, but was putting against them. So there's many things over here. Again, the U.S. is very, very wary of getting involved in any way. I think Trump's favorite mechanism is economic pressure and sanctions and things like that. So I do expect to see him go hard on that. But how much that will bring to bear remains to be seen, because as the years tick by, this regime is getting more and more powerful, closer to nuclear weapons, and the picture just gets trickier.
And getting closer to China and Russia. It is a real balancing act for Trump in particular, because he was elected on a landslide on America First policies. They do not want to be involved in every war around the world. So there isn't an appetite to get involved in this. But they also have to acknowledge how destabilising Iran is, and as it's becoming more emboldened, particularly with its nuclear program. How does he sell this to the Republican base if he does need to have some sort of involvement and some sort of investment in regime change?
It's a tough one, and regime change is another thing. It's sort of become a dirty word in the U.S. because U.S. fingerprints are all over many regime changes, overtly and covertly, in the last half century. So I think that's a tough one. To the extent that he can describe it as it is stabilizing and that has repercussions back to things at home, as simple as gas prices, for instance, given their role there, or terrorism or security or things like that, then maybe there's a way in there. But just a straight up regime change, it's going to be a tough one.
Now to the Trump administration's war against Big Pharma, and I'll have more on this after the break. But Kosha, at its heart, this policy is to ensure these multi-billion-dollar companies are not price gouging in the US and charging exorbitant prices in the US compared to what they charge elsewhere in the world. RFK Jr. was there to trumpet this policy.
He can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country. And he is standing here for the American people. I don't know what, there's writers like Lord Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich, who are saying that President Trump is on the side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than President Donald Trump. And I'm very, very proud of you, Mr. President.
He has a point there, Kosha. Trump cannot be bought. He is the only president whose net worth actually dropped during his presidency. And I guess that's one of the perks of being a billionaire.
That's definitely one of his superpowers, as the kids say, because pharma is a very, very enriched and well-funded industry, and therefore there's a lot of lobbying dollars that flows into Washington, and that's made it a difficult nut to crack, and he's going to that. The other thing, too, is this strikes right at the heart of Trump's worldview, which is the U.S. has been ripped off by other countries for so long as it relates to trade deficits and tariffs, as it relates to underwriting security for the whole world. And this is a big pillar, the drugs, because the U.S. subsidizes drug R&D for the whole world. All the innovation, all the patents that's very expensive to attain happen there. And then just the way that the global markets are structured and export laws and all of that, they sell it at dirt cheap prices. Generics can become available in other countries, whereas the U.S. consumer has to pay 3 to 10 times as much. And that's what he's trying to undo here. But it'll be challenged in court and elsewhere, so we shall see how far it gets.
It's incredible. Like, they even are finding a reason to complain about this policy. You would think cheaper drug prices would be something they could embrace. Kosha Gada, thanks for your time.
Pleasure.